What I'm about to tell you is something I swore never to share again. It's a story so utterly twisted, so deeply wrong, that even thinking about it sends a shiver down my spine. This isn't some campfire tale or a legend whispered in the dark. This is real. This happened to my best friend Alex, and the line between what's real and what's a nightmare was blurred forever that day. If you've ever dabbled in the occult, or even just been curious about the forbidden, you need to hear this. But be warned, some doors, once opened, can never truly be shut. As you listen, if you feel that familiar prickle of fear, hit that like button. If you dare to delve deeper into the shadows with me, subscribe. And if you have friends who think they're brave enough for true horror, share this with them. Because Alex isn't alone anymore. And sometimes I wonder if a piece of whatever he found, it's to ride with me too.
It all started innocently enough, like most nightmares do. Alex, my best friend since kindergarten, was always the adventurous one, the guy who'd jump into anything head first. He was fascinated by the weird, the unexplained, the fringe sciences, and yes, the occult. Me? I was more the cautious type, the one who'd usually talk him out of his wilder ideas. But this time, I couldn't. This time, he was hooked on something different. He'd been down a rabbit hole for weeks, researching ancient texts, forgotten languages, and obscure rituals. He said he was looking for deeper truths, something beyond the mundane existence we all lived. I just rolled my eyes, figured it was another one of his phases, like the time he tried to build a working Tesla coil in his garage. But this time, his eyes had a different kind of glint in them, a manic, almost feverish excitement that honestly unnerved me. "Dude, you gotta see this," he'd called me, his voice practically vibrating with energy. I found it. The real deal. I drove over to his place, a small, cluttered apartment above a dusty bookstore that always smelled faintly of old paper and stale coffee. When I walked in, Alex was hunched over his desk, illuminated by the harsh glow of his computer monitor. But it wasn't the screen that held his attention. It was a book. Not just any book. This thing, it looked ancient. The cover was a dark, brittle leather stretched over what felt like warped wood. It had strange, almost alien symbols carved into it, and the metal clasps holding it shut were tarnished and pitted. It looked less like a book and more like an artifact dug up from some unholy ground. The air in his apartment felt heavy, charged, like before a thunderstorm. Even Max, his usually chill golden retriever, was whimpering softly in his bed, his tail tucked between his legs. "What in the hell is that?" I asked, my voice a little rougher than I intended. Alex barely looked up. "The Necronomicon," he breathed, his eyes wide, pupils dilated. Or, well, a fragment, a translation of a fragment anyway. It's supposed to be impossible to find, forbidden, but I found a guy online, deep web stuff, who had a copy. Said it was passed down through generations, kept hidden for centuries. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The Necronomicon. Even I, with my limited occult knowledge, knew that name. It was synonymous with madness, with things best left undisturbed. "Alex, seriously, put that thing away. You don't mess with stuff like that." He scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. "Don't be such a square, man. This is knowledge, power. Think of what we could learn." He gently ran his fingers over the cover, almost reverently. "The guy who sold it to me, he had some weird rules. Said I could never read it aloud, never let it leave my sight, and always keep it in the dark when not in use." "And you believed him?" I asked, incredulous. "That sounds less like rules and more like a warning, dude." "He was convincing," Alex said, his voice trailing off, lost in thought. "He said it held truths about the outer darkness and those who wait beyond the veil. He called them the Old Ones. Lovecraft stuff. I tried to appeal to his common sense, which usually worked. Lovecraft is fiction, Alex. It's stories. This is a real-life prop from a bad horror movie. What if it's cursed or some kind of hoax? He just shook his head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. It's not a hoax. I can feel it. There's an energy to it. He carefully unlatched the clasps. They groaned, a metallic, almost pained sound as he opened the book. The pages inside were thick, yellowed parchment, covered in cramped, spidery script. It wasn't English or any language I recognized. It looked like ancient hieroglyphics, mixed with flowing, unsettling symbols that seemed to writhe on the page. Some pages had crude, disturbing illustrations, alien landscapes, impossible geometries, and figures that were vaguely humanoid but utterly monstrous, with too many eyes or limbs or no discernible features at all. The translation is in the margins, Alex explained, pointing to a smaller, more modern script that snaked alongside the ancient text. It's a partial translation, thank God. The guy who sold it to me said reading the original could alter your mind. My stomach churned. Alex, please don't read it. Don't even look at it for too long. This is bad juju, man. He ignored me, completely absorbed. His fingers trembled slightly as he traced the words, his eyes darting back and forth across the page. He started to mumble, reading the marginal notes under his breath. It was a jumble of abstract concepts, cosmic horrors, and terrifying pronouncements about the fragile nature of reality. He read about the spaces between spaces, about entities that sleep and dream and whose dreams are our nightmares. As he read, the air in the room grew colder, noticeably so, even though it was a warm summer evening. Max let out another low whine, then crawled under the bed, burying his head in his paws. The silence in the apartment became oppressive, broken only by Alex's hushed, frantic mumbling and the frantic beating of my own heart. Then Alex paused, his finger hovering over a particular passage. His breath hitched. This is a ritual, he whispered, his voice barely audible. A way to communicate? To see what's really there? Alex, no! I lunged forward, trying to close the book, but he reacted faster, pulling it away from me. Just a little further, he said, his eyes burning with an unnatural light. He started reading again, this time a little louder, a cadence forming in his voice, a rhythm that was unsettlingly hypnotic. It wasn't the English translation he was reading now, but what sounded like some distorted guttural Latin mixed with the strange, ancient tongue from the main text. The words scraped at my eardrums, felt wrong in my soul. They felt like keys turning in a lock that should never be opened. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, to coalesce in the corners. The temperature dropped even more, and I could see my breath in the air. A faint, foul odor, like stagnant water and something metallic, began to permeate the apartment. And then a sound. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, like tiny claws dragging across a vast, unseen surface. It grew louder, more insistent, a whispering rustle that seemed to be inside my head, not just in the room. Alex stopped, mid-word. His head snapped up, his eyes wide and unfocused, staring not at me, but at something behind me, something unseen. The book, still open, slipped from his trembling fingers and clattered to the floor. Alex, what is it? I whispered, my voice barely a thread. I didn't want to turn around. I couldn't. He didn't answer. He just pointed a shaking finger at the empty space behind me, a look of abject terror twisting his features. It heard me, he choked out, his voice hoarse, ragged. It's Here!
The air grew heavy, like a suffocating blanket. The scratching sound intensified, evolving into a dry, skittering noise that seemed to fill every crevice of Alex's apartment. It wasn't just behind me anymore. It was all around us, above, below, a symphony of unseen movement. Alex was frozen, his face a mask of pure horror, his gaze fixed on an invisible point. Max, from under the bed, let out a terrified yelp, a sound I'd never heard from him before, a desperate plea. "Alex, what are you seeing?" I forced the words out, my own heart hammering against my ribs. My vision felt blurry, the edges of the room undulating as if the very air was distorting. The foul smell grew stronger, now laced with something acrid, like ozone and burnt hair. He couldn't speak. He just kept pointing, his finger trembling violently. I could feel a growing pressure in the room, like something immense was pressing in on us, compressing the space. It was a suffocating, claustrophobic dread that made my lungs ache for air. My instinct screamed at me to run, to bolt out the door and never look back, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. Then the lights flickered, once, twice, plunging the room into near darkness before returning, dimmer this time, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to dance with malevolent life. In that brief moment of darkness, I saw it, or I thought I did, a fleeting, indistinct shape in my peripheral vision, something tall and impossibly thin, retracting into the deeper shadows. It was gone before I could properly register it, leaving only a chilling echo in my mind. Alex finally found his voice, a broken, barely audible gasp. The eyes, he choked, tears streaming down his face. So many eyes. They're watching. I spun around, my blood turning to ice, but there was nothing there. Just the familiar, albeit now terrifying, clutter of Alex's apartment. No, not nothing. The shadows themselves seemed to have deepened, taking on a more tangible quality, almost like velvet drapes woven from pure night. And then I heard it, undeniably close, a faint, wet slurp. It came from the corner where Alex had pointed, the corner where I thought I'd seen the impossible shape. "We need to get out of here, Alex, now!" I grabbed his arm, pulling him towards the door, but he remained stiff, unresponsive. His eyes were still wide, still fixed, staring at something only he could perceive. He was in a trance of terror. It wants me to read more," he whispered, his voice distant, ethereal. "It wants to be fully seen." "No, it doesn't. It wants to hurt you," I shouted, shaking him, trying to break him free of whatever hold this unseen entity had on him. His skin was clammy, cold to the touch. I looked frantically at the fallen book. It lay open on the floor, the disturbing illustrations seeming to pulse with a faint, unholy light of their own. Then, a new sound, a low, guttural growl. It wasn't Max. It was too deep, too primal, too inhuman. It rumbled through the floorboards, vibrated in my teeth. Max, under the bed, began to whine again, a desperate whimpering sound that tore at my heart. The bookshelves lining the wall shuddered, books clattered, some falling to the floor with dull thuds. A glass of water on Alex's desk tipped over, spilling its contents, the liquid forming a dark creeping stain that seemed to snake towards the open book. I knew, with a horrifying certainty, that if Alex stayed in this state, he was lost. Whatever he had summoned was feeding on his fear, his fascination. I had to snap him out of it. "Alex, look at me," I yelled, cupping his face in my hands, forcing him to meet my gaze. His eyes were still glazed, but there was a flicker of recognition, a brief spark of the old Alex. It's in my head," he whispered, his voice cracking. "It's showing me things that shouldn't be. Fight it, Alex. Focus on me. Focus on Max. Focus on anything real." I tightened my grip on his arms, trying to ground him. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the entire apartment. A framed picture on the wall above us, a snapshot of Alex and me at a high school football game, flew off its hook and shattered against the floor. The glass splintered, reflecting the dim, flickering light in 1,000 fractured images. And in one of those shards, I saw it, a brief, horrifying reflection. Not of us, not of the room, but of something else. a pulsating amorphous mass of shadow studded with countless glinting obsidian eyes, each one reflecting a pinprick of the room's dim light. It writhed, it expanded, filling the entire shard, and then it was gone, replaced by my own terrified reflection. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore from my throat. My grip on Alex loosened. He saw the terror in my eyes, the confirmation of his own nightmare. It galvanized him. "The book!" he suddenly shrieked, his voice regaining a desperate urgency. "We have to close it! Put it back!" We both scrambled for the book, a desperate, fumbling struggle in the oppressive atmosphere. The pages seemed to resist, fluttering as if caught in an unseen wind, the strange symbols on them seeming to glow with a faint internal light of their own. The air was thick with the foul odor, and the scratching, skittering sounds were now a frantic, overwhelming din. It was like 1,000 insects with razor claws were crawling across every surface, scratching at the very fabric of reality. Finally, with a combined effort, we managed to wrench the brittle cover shut. The ancient clasps snapped back into place with a sickening clack, a sound that felt profoundly final. The moment the book was closed, the room went silent. The cold receded, the foul smell dissipated, and the flickering light stabilized. Max whimpered once more, then was silent. The oppressive pressure lifted, leaving behind only the ringing in my ears and the frantic pounding of my heart. We stood there, panting, staring at the closed book as if it were a venomous snake. It lay innocent enough, on the floor, its dark, ancient cover now seeming merely old, not malevolent. Is it gone?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. Alex didn't answer. He just collapsed into his desk chair, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. I knelt beside him, trying to comfort him, but I was shaking just as badly. We had stared into the abyss, and the abyss had definitely stared back. But the silence, the return to normalcy, it felt too sudden, too complete, like the calm before another, even greater storm. And as I looked at Alex, huddled and broken, I couldn't shake the terrifying feeling that something had changed, something had stayed behind, something had hitched a ride.
The night after we closed the book was a blur of frantic phone calls to anyone who would listen and utter disbelief from everyone we spoke to. Alex, still pale and shaken, could barely articulate what he'd seen. I tried to explain, but even as the words left my mouth, they sounded insane, like something out of a Pulp Fiction novel. The police, when we finally called them about the broken picture frame and the vague feeling of intrusion, just looked at us with thinly veiled suspicion. No signs of forced entry, no valuables taken, just two traumatized young men rambling about forbidden books and invisible entities. They chalked it up to stress, maybe a bit too much late-night caffeine, and left with a polite but firm warning about wasting their time. The next few days were a blur of trying to regain some semblance of normalcy. We packed the Necronomicon, or whatever sinister fragment it was, into a heavy, lead-lined chest Alex had used for his experiments, and buried it deep in his backyard under an old oak tree. It felt symbolic, a desperate attempt to put the horrors back where they belonged. Alex refused to even look at it again, his obsession replaced by a profound, debilitating fear. But the fear didn't leave us. Not really. Alex changed. The vibrant, adventurous spark in his eyes was gone, replaced by a constant, haunted weariness. He started losing weight, his clothes hanging off him. He developed an unsettling habit of staring into empty spaces, his eyes wide and unfocused, as if still seeing what I couldn't. He barely slept, plagued by nightmares that would leave him screaming, soaked in sweat. "He's always there," he'd whisper to me during one of his rare calm moments, his voice hollow, just beyond the edge of sight, whispering, waiting. He swore he could hear them, a constant low murmur just at the periphery of his hearing, sometimes forming into words, promises of forbidden knowledge, invitations to step beyond. He'd snap at shadows, flinch at sudden noises. Max, usually his shadow, now avoided him, whimpering whenever Alex got too close. The dog would often stare intently at empty corners of the room, letting out low, anxious growls. It was like he could still sense something. I tried to help him. I really did. I got him into therapy, but the therapists, bless their hearts, chalked it up to PTSD, perhaps a psychotic break. They couldn't, or wouldn't, acknowledge the true nature of his torment. How could they? He started on medication, but it only dulled the edges, never truly silencing the whispers, never truly making him feel alone. Then came the incidents, small at first, then escalating. One night, I was staying over at his place. I couldn't bear to leave him alone. We were trying to watch a movie, something light, but Alex was too jumpy. Suddenly, the TV screen flickered, not to static, but to a series of grotesque, rapidly flashing images, impossible geometric patterns, swirling voids, and fleeting glimpses of those multi-eyed, amorphous horrors I'd glimpsed in the glass shard. It lasted only a second, then returned to the movie, but we both saw it. Alex screamed, a raw, terrified sound. Another time, his reflection in a mirror distorted. Not in a funhouse mirror way, but subtly, chillingly. His eyes would appear to shift, his mouth would stretch into an impossibly wide, silent scream, and then just as quickly, it would return to normal. He smashed every mirror in his apartment after that. But the most terrifying incident happened about 2 months after the book. Alex had been particularly agitated that day, convinced they were getting closer, trying to anchor themselves. He'd locked himself in his room, muttering to himself. I heard a crash from inside, followed by a choked cry. When I forced the door open, the room was a mess, like a poltergeist had gone through it. Alex was huddled in a corner, trembling uncontrollably, pointing at the opposite wall. The wall, he stammered, his eyes wide with a familiar terror. It breathed. It stretched. I looked at the wall, but it was just a wall, plaster and paint. But as I stared, a subtle, almost imperceptible undulation seemed to ripple across its surface, like something vast and unseen was pressing against it from the other side, trying to push through. The air grew cold again, the familiar metallic, stagnant stench returning. That was the night I truly understood. Alex wasn't just seeing things. Whatever he had summoned, whatever entities lay beyond the veil, they had imprinted themselves on him. They were using him as a bridge, a way to slowly, subtly seep into our reality. And they were getting stronger. He didn't need to read the book aloud anymore. The words, the forbidden knowledge, they were inside him. He was a vessel, a living conduit for whatever cosmic horror he had inadvertently unleashed. The last time I saw Alex, truly saw him, was about 6 months ago. He was in an institution, a place for those whose minds had shattered beyond repair. He looked like a ghost, thin and frail, his eyes holding an ancient, terrible knowledge that no human should possess. When I visited, he didn't recognize me at first. He just kept whispering, his gaze fixed on a point just over my shoulder, a faint, knowing smile on his lips. "They're not alone, you know," he'd rasp, his voice barely a whisper, yet carrying an immense weight. "None of us are. We just don't see them. Not yet. But they're learning. And soon they'll make themselves known." He tilted his head slightly, that unsettling, knowing smile widening. "You were there too, weren't you? You felt them. You saw the reflection. They know you now. They're waiting for you to invite them in."
I left that day and never went back. The doctors said he was beyond help. They diagnosed him with an advanced form of schizophrenia, a complete break from reality. But I knew better. I knew he was just seeing what truly was there. And sometimes, when I'm alone late at night, in the deepest quiet, I hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching just at the edge of my hearing. And I smell it, that faint, foul odor, like stagnant water and ozone. And I wonder, staring into the dark corners of my own room, if Alex was right, if a piece of whatever he unleashed, whatever unspeakable horror lay within those forbidden pages, had hitched a ride with me, too. And I wonder if I'll ever truly be alone.